Welcome back to another episode of Exposing D&D 5e Monster CRs with me, Andrew. And taking over the second position from the off is the Hobgoblin. Now, let's dive right into the monster here and take a look at its base stats. And for that, we always look at the armor class and hit points and then a couple of the stats. So we'll throw in the AC for 18, which comes from its chainmail, plus using a shield. It's a medium goblinoid, and it has 2d8 hit points, with a constitution of 12, a wisdom score of 10, and a charisma of 9, and its expected CR is to be 1/2. Now, with the base stats out of the way, we would normally look at the skill section here, but because all it has is senses, languages, and challenge rating, we can skip right over that. But now into the traits area, we have martial advantage. And once per turn, the Hobgoblin can deal an extra 7 points of damage when it hits a creature with a weapon attack within 5 feet of an ally. And we'll come down into the traits section here on my tool and click in Martial Advantage for 7 DPR per round. So in essence, we're expecting our Hobgoblin here to get Martial Advantage every turn. On top of that, our Hobgoblin has a longsword and a longbow. Luckily, they do exactly the same amount of damage, so it doesn't matter what we do here. So going up to the top, in the actions section, let's go ahead and add in the +3 for its attack bonus, which it already has. That's the base number for most monsters within a +3 attack, so we won't have to worry about shifting that. But coming over to the workspace here, we will add in the longbow hit of 5.5 damage or the longsword hit of 5.5 damage. Again, it doesn't matter because they both do exactly the same amount of damage. If we take 5 and multiply it by 3 rounds of combat, we'll just end up getting the full attack average of 5 damage per round. And that's pretty much it. Now here's the interesting thing. Our Hobgoblin is rated at a CR 1/2. Just from the numbers alone, we're pulling up a CR 1. Where the green marker here is, you just bump over to the CR column and you're seeing an exact CR 1. Our defensive ratings are giving us a DCR of 1/2 plus an OCR of 1. And because the attack bonus is exactly what's expected, there's no shift and why there's no dark red here. And because of that, we end up with an average of 1 plus the 1/2, giving us 0.75 or 3/4, and we have to round up or down to the closest CR rating. So effectively, the Hobgoblin is a CR 1. Now the question is, how do we fix the Hobgoblin? Because we really don't want to use a Hobgoblin at CR 1 against players when we're expecting it to be a CR 1/2. Well, one of the first things I found in the shorts was, let's just immediately get rid of Martial Advantage. And what happens here? Well, getting rid of Martial Advantage actually moves the CR value from 1 down to 1/2. And our OCR shifts down from a 1 to a 1/4. But the thing is that because of the higher defensive rating, the OCR is going to be a 1/4, and the DCR is going to be a 1/2, as we see here on my left column here. When we average all that out, we get somewhere around 3/8, I think. And again, we will average that up to 1/2. So that's the easiest way to fix the Hobgoblin. But what if we want to keep Martial Advantage? What do we do then? Well, we could put Martial Advantage back in and potentially drop that down from its 2d6 to maybe 1d6. And let's see what happens if we switch that from 2d6, which averages out to 7 damage, to 1d6, which will average out to 3.5, or 3 in this instance. So we'll change the 7 down here in Martial Advantage to a 3. That all around gives us the same amount here. And now our Hobgoblin is a CR 1/2, keeping the same amount of damage from the longsword or longbow, and we still get Martial Advantage. All we have to do is just reduce it from 2d6 to 1d6. But because of the shift in average damages, we can now actually have a CR 1/2 Hobgoblin while still keeping Martial Advantage. Alright, so what else could we do to modify our Hobgoblin? Well, we could have some fun and make a legendary Hobgoblin if we wanted to, and throw in some legendary resistances just for the heck of it. Coming over here, let's give our Hobgoblin 1 legendary resistant, just for the heck of it. This will give it an effective plus 10 hit points, shifting our hit points from 11 to 21. And then it doesn't really shift anything else. The DCR just becomes a 1/2, which is great. If we wanted to give it a couple more legendary resistances, like is usual, of maybe 3, then we're seeing plus 30 hit points and a shift up into the CR value of 1 after our DCR shifts up to 1 as well. But here's the problem. By giving it legendary resistances, this may drag out combat, especially if it doesn't die from its 11 hit points already. So what could we do to make this more of an offensive threat than a defensive threat? Because it already has a pretty high AC from the 18 coming from Chainmail and Shield. So what else could we potentially do? Well, maybe we give it aggressive, like an orc. That gives it plus 2 DPR and actually will shift it up to a CR 1/2 if our martial advantage is still changed to 1d6 rather than 2. If we don't want to use aggressive and keep that just to the orcs, maybe we give it pack tactics for some reason. Or now it has a plus 1 effective attack bonus. Well, luckily that doesn't shift anything because our base attack is already 3 and it's expecting a 3. So our CR 1/2 won't shift, and we can actually give the Hobgoblin pack tactics for the heck of it if we wanted to. I wouldn't bother with parry because the Hobgoblin Warlord already has that, and if you want a Hobgoblin Warlord, why not use the Hobgoblin Warlord? But if you wanted to see what it looks like, let's throw parry on for the heck of it. And that'll shift our Hobgoblin up to a CR 1. So we're getting some things here that we could use without actually changing the CR of the Hobgoblin. But other than that, anything we do to it is going to really shift it up next to the CR 1. So this is a high CR 1/2 Hobgoblin here. So for all intents and purposes, we have a CR 1/2, or if we're using it right out of the book with the martial advantage being 2d6, a CR 1. And if we're using it right out of the book, then let's look at it as a CR 1, which we found here before making any kind of changes. And with that, I always like to go to the Solo Monsters and Xanathar's Guide for Everything to see how to use this as an epic encounter for our players. And unfortunately, at CR 1/2, it's not possible. But if we are using it as a CR 1 with martial advantage, we could really only use it against 4 characters at first level. So if your players are going through some kind of a dungeon and come across a Hobgoblin, and we're using it as a printed CR 1, this could be an epic encounter for 4 players. Now if we want to use it in groups of monsters, like is intended, then if we're using it as a CR 1 monster, we would use 5 players at first level against 1 Hobgoblin, or, as I always recommend, with a party of 3 or 4 players, which is usually about average, we can start using the Hobgoblin against 3 players at 2nd level, 2 players at 3rd level, 1 player against 4th level, or we can start using multiple Hobgoblins at 5th level and above. Now, if we use the Hobgoblin at CR 1/2, and we have martial advantage drop down, or we just get rid of martial advantage altogether, we would start using it with 3 players against 1 Hobgoblin at 1st level, again, CR 1/2, or 1-to-1 basis at 2nd and 3rd level, and then at 4th level at CR 1/2, we start getting into the swarming monster territory. How to use the Hobgoblin in combat. Now, the nice thing about the Hobgoblin is that they're extremely versatile for melee or ranged because they do exactly the same amount of damage every round, and that still includes martial advantage. As long as the Hobgoblin has an ally within 5 feet, they're going to get that advantage. So, we can use this in the front lines if we need the Hobgoblin up tanking and doing what they need to do, or we could then switch to the longbow or have the longbow used first and having them at least 150 feet away, dealing damage that way as well, giving the melee support, as well as any casters you might have thrown into the group. It's always nice to have a mix-up of a couple melee, a couple ranged, and have those ranged be either physical damage or spellcasting ranged as well. So that's the nice thing about the Hobgoblin. Extremely versatile when it comes to placing them on the battlefield. Have them up in melee or have them back with support and ranged attacks. And there you have it. That's the Hobgoblin, and we've exposed its CR rating of 1/2 or 1. And in the future, may all your encounters be even rated.